Next, let's talk sponges. We've applied the foundation with a brush. Now we want to go over with a damp, not soaking wet, not dry, damp beauty blender. If you run your sponge under the tap and squeeze, 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 squeeze before you start your makeup, by the time you get to this step, it'll be perfect. What we're going to do is, again, just tap and bounce all over the product that we applied, for the same reason that we smoothed out our under eyes before. So just to give us that really nice, even finish to the skin. And then I'm going to tap on my hand for that last little bit of foundation that's on there. I'm just going to go over any bits that I feel like might need a little extra something. When it comes to contour and concealer, everybody has their own way that they like to do this and their own orders that they like to apply it in. This is mine and this is personal preference. As you might see, I have darkness under my eyes. I have pigmentation, it's genetic, there's nothing I can do, it just is what it is. It does get worse if sleep is worse, but unfortunately it isn't going to go away anytime soon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to brighten it up instead. This is my Becca Under Eye Brightening Cream in the shade light to medium. So it's a pinky colour. And what I'm going to do is take a small flat brush. I'm going to look up and just apply a little bit in those corners there. And then I'm going to take a little fluffy brush. I'm just going to smooth that out so that it's a nice thin layer just in those areas where I have that pigmentation. As you can see, I'm not dragging it all the way down. I'm literally just being really careful and popping it in the areas that I have the pigmentation so that it does do that counterbalance of colour. Next step I'm going to do whilst that's on there, the next thing I'm going to do is apply a bit of contour to my face. The difference between contouring and bronzing. Contouring is like a grey finish shade. And then what it does is it mimics shadow and it creates that dimensional shift between the face. Bronzing does is it brings the warmth back to the face and applies a little bit more of the colour, as if, again, you were sun-kissed, like where the sun would tan your face, like little bits like that. Show you the difference. These are my Made by Mitchell palettes. You can see that one has like a grey cast to it, whereas these are much warmer. So that would be your contour shade and these would be your bronzing shades. Now for today, as much as we're going on a night out, I'm not too bothered about chiseling and contouring and doing all that stuff. Instead, we're going to stick to warming up the face and creating dimension that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a small dense brush like this. This is from Sephora, from their own brush collection. And this is what we're going to use for contour. The reason we're not using the Peaches brush to apply it is look at the size difference in those two brushes. If you apply it with this, obviously it's going to cover a much greater surface area. If you use it with this, then the precision you have is going to be so much greater because the head is smaller. For our Made by Mitchell palette, we're going to take this shade here, which is a nice warm bronzy shade. I am just going to, again, just tap straight into that product. But what we're going to do differently this time is you can use your hand if you want to, but I know you're probably sick of that now. So an alternative is I'm going to use the lid and I'm just going to bounce that around here. One, I don't want too much product. Made by Mitchell products are very pigmented. And when I say a little goes a long way, a little goes a long way. As do many other brilliant contour and bronzing palettes. So don't feel the need to put it straight onto your skin. If that's one thing you take away from today, that's what I want it to be. Don't apply directly to the skin. Apply to the hand, or a palette. In the absence of a palette, just use a lid. It's fine. Get a wipe and clean it afterwards. What we're going to do is we're going to start at the point where we want it to be the darkest, which is the top of the ear. So where your ear meets your face, that'll be your starting point. So let me just, a bit of demonstration. So we're going to start up here. So here is where the top of your ear meets your face. What you'll notice is that's actually the start of your cheekbone too. So what we're going to do is we're going to run the product down, 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 down and stop just here. So just at the outside of the eye. So that's how far we're going to bring that in. And by starting here in our stamping motions, it's keeping that dimension close to the hairline where we want it to be the darkest and blending outwards towards the centre of the face where we want it to blend beautifully and not be too harsh. Doing it in a way that makes the tools and the products work for you rather than it being the other way around. And we're also going to work in light layers because what the last thing you want to do is apply too much and then panic. If you build it up and build it up gradually, you'll see the point where you're happy. And now, once you've sort of carved out that shape on your cheekbone, we're just going to bring that product up through the temple and follow that around the hairline in that same stamping motion. And I like to go in a bit of a semicircle shape. You can see the difference already. I like to go in a little semicircle shape, so it comes from the outside of my eyebrow right up to the centre. And I've got a lovely little freckle there that marks the middle for me. But bring it up right to the centre, so I leave this bit free. And I just create the shadow on that outer edge. Now what we need to do is take your beauty blender and just start again, bouncing just over the edges of where we applied that bronzer. And then take a view and see if you feel like you need to go back in with a little bit more. And again, just use what's on the lid and just build it and just slightly build. The important thing to remember at this stage is we aren't finished yet. We've still got concealer to go on, which will help carve out the face. And we've still got blusher to go on, which will help bring it all together. So all we're looking for at this point is a starting shape. Back to concealer. So we've brightened our under eyes. Now what we're going to do is we're going to neutralise that a little bit more. Again, this is personal to me because I do have that pigmentation issue under my eye. So I'm taking my NARS Radiant Creamy Concealer and it's in the shade Honey. And I'm just going to take a tiny bit of that, like literally a tiny bit, on the back of my hand. I'm going to take the fluffy brush that we used earlier to blend out that Becca Brightening Cream. I'm just going to put a tiny, tiny, tiny bit just right under where that pigmentation is. And basically what this is going to do is again just help neutralise that pigment. I'm doing this as like a bit more of an extreme step because it is something that bothers me. You could use one or the other of these techniques. It's completely up to you. As long as you keep it where that pigment is, you're absolutely fine. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my actual concealer. So this, you'll notice, is lighter than my skin, but it's not so bright, Exhibit A, that it's like a white cast. This is the Hourglass Vanish Concealer in Silk. And again, I'm just going to take that on the back of my hand. So taking a clean brush, this is the Morphe M224. It's a very flat, thin synthetic brush, which is perfect for concealer. I'm just going to take a little bit of that. Again, the exact same thing, just pull it out slightly on one side of the brush. I'm just going to start carving out where I want that concealer to be. So I want it to go in a nice thin layer up the side of the nose to give my nose some shape and dimension. You'll hear that word a lot because that is basically what we're doing with makeup. It's creating shape and dimension. I'm just going to pull that out slightly, just underneath where we had that liner before. And again, I'm keeping this really central to the face because that's where we want it to be nice and bright, nice and lifted as if it's moving forward. Just between the brows. And then a little bit just down here on the centre of the nose. And that's our starting concealer point. When it comes to blending concealer, there's a few ways we can do this. This is my secret weapon. So this is the Hourglass concealer brush. As you can see, again, similar to the Peaches brush before, it is at an angle. It's called Kitten Foot. So you don't have to buy the Hourglass brush. I know it's expensive. I love it because of how dense it is. One, the angle, and two, the density. I think it's just beautiful. You can also get very similar brushes that are at a more affordable price point, such as one from HF Cosmetics is again very similar in its shape. And what I'm going to do with the brush first is just take the edges of the concealer and just pat those edges into the nose, and then we're going to work our way up. So start from the point where we're wanting to blend and work our way all the way up. Then I'm going to bring it down the side of the nose. And you'll notice I keep looking up. That's because I do have creases and I do have lines under my eyes. So by looking up, I'm working that product around so it doesn't sit as much into those lines and creases. Unfortunately, if you have them, you have them. There's not really that much you can do about that. But what we can do is try not to accentuate them any further than they already are. And we're going to repeat that across the forehead. Just over the chin, but I'm going to leave the nose bit, and that's because I'm lazy when it comes to nose contour, and I'm just going to let that sit. We'll do all the other stuff, and then I'll hardly have to blend it out, and it gives that effect that we've contoured the nose when actually we haven't. So now we're happy with that. I am going to want to brighten that up a little bit more. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to take if I can find it, I'm going to take that flat brush again, and I'm going to take a brighter concealer, just slightly, and I'm going to place this just here in that inner corner, like literally in that tiny little space. I'm using hardly any product, and all I'm doing here is again layering products of different shades to create a little bit more dimension and a little bit more depth to the face, and it makes all the difference when it comes to those brightening under eyes.